More than 250 bills across 43 states seek to limit the freedom to vote. And they're all Republicans. And Georgia is leading the way. So, can we say, welcome to 21st century Jim Crow? Hi, I'm Dr. Venus, your hot mess millionaire. And today we are talking about Republicans are amazing. The level of ruthlessness is unparalleled. They even got it to the point where they are blocking black churches for driving people to the polls. They're like, you can't vote on Sunday after church. I mean, you can't have water. You can't get water or food while you wait in really long lines in Georgia. And it just shows you how desperate they are. Okay. But the thing that I want to speak about today is the power of billionaire black women in terms of undermining this new type of Jim Crow. Okay. So before we get all the way up in the cut, please make sure that you join the Facebook group. Make sure you subscribe to Hot Mess Millionaire Face group. Hot Mess Millionaire podcast. Please make sure you share, you post, you comment, you tag people. Sharing is an act of love. No one else is talking about these type of topics the way that I am. And it's important that we get educated before we, so we're not stuck in a caste system that's 7 generations deep. Okay. Now I'm also, gotta say this about Facebook for Hot Mess Millionaire Facebook group. On Saturdays, we have Network Like a Money Mogul, network like rich people. So please join that group if you want to learn how to network or network with people who network about networks, not individuals. That's the first thing. It's amazing. Okay. And also, I am I'm doing a tech startup. I'm birthing 100 black women billionaires in the next 5 years, and one of them could be you. So if you want to participate as a content creator for my next go around, make sure you jump in. Or if you want to support or get the updates, because we're moving into production, y'all. We're moving into production. And so I'll be giving updates through my app interest form. That is also here in the comments. So please join that as well. And walk with me, because we're doing this. And we have to do this if we want to be able to create a level of freedom, not just financial freedom, but a level of political freedom for the next 5 generations. Okay? So please share, please tag, please subscribe, and let me go back in. Let me talk to you a bit about this. So last week, Georgia felt the need to express itself. The Republican Georgia. Now you have to keep in mind they're still mad. They're smarting over the fact that black people specifically, but poor brown, different disenfranchised people came out 800,000 strong. Like came out swinging, okay, and turned Georgia from red to blue, from Republican to Democratic. Now, while we were able to do that, and we were able to secure the Democratic seats in the Senate, the GOP, the white men in charge, in terms of running the state, okay, they are mad. And you know, when white men get mad, they create laws. That is how they fight. And it's not new. So when President Biden talks about these new law suppressions, these different ways to suppress voters, and I'll talk to you a little bit about the historical part of what that looks like. It's a new term of new kind of Jim Crow, okay? Because they do this every time they get mad. When they feel like they're losing power, when they feel like they've been done wrong, they go and create new laws. That's how they fight, okay? So I want to slow it down and break it down so you can understand when people say Jim Crow, what are they talking about? I'm going to read it to you so you don't have to guess. Okay. And also, I have some wonderful resources. Please read them. When you share my work, you're actually sharing education. Okay. I curate each of the articles so I'll know what you're reading. And it's all designed for you to be educated and informed so you can make choice from an informed place. Okay. So, but let me go back to Jim Crow. All right. And I pulled this. I love this. It's from American Black Holocaust Museum. okay? And it's all about how we've been hurt. And it's gathered information, so it's curated and it's a great source for us. So when we talk about Jim Crow, let me just read this to you so you can hear it. From about 1900 to 1965, some people say 1865 to 1965, this depends on who you read, most African Americans were not allowed to vote in the South. This was especially true in the Deep South, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina. White people in power used many methods to keep African Americans from voting. Some of these methods also prevented poor white people from voting. So here are 8 ways historically marginalized people have been kept from voting. The first one was violence. Blacks who tried to vote were threatened, beaten, and killed. Their families were harmed. Sometimes their homes were burnt down. Others lost their jobs or were thrown off their farms. Okay. Then there was also the violence of intimidation. Okay, that prevented them from even thinking about voting. Still, some blacks passed the requirements to vote and took the risk. Some whites have used violence to punish those uppity people and show other blacks what would happen to them if they voted. So, sometimes they would lynch black men, lynch black people, and they would do it so other black people would be too scared to vote, so we would come out. Okay. Another thing they did was literacy tests. They made it a big deal to make sure black people did not know how to read. So if you don't know how to read, and one of the requirements for voting is you read, that means you can't vote because it's a legal thing. Okay. Another thing that they did was they did a propriety test. In the South, 100 years ago, many states allowed only property owners to vote. Many blacks and whites who had no property could not vote. Another thing they had was the grandfather clause. People who could not read or own no property were allowed to vote if their fathers or grandfathers had voted before 1867. So you know that black people, we were born into slavery. So generationally, we were born to always work and never have rights. So the grandfather clause nixed us out of that too, because we weren't allowed to vote before 1867. Okay. Or they had all white primary elections. In the United States, there are usually 2 rounds of elections. First the primary, then the general. In the primary, Republicans run against Republicans and Democrats run against Democrats. In the general election, the winner of the Republican Party runs against the winner of the Democratic Party. The Republican or Democrat who gets the most votes is elected. However, in the South, from about 1900 to about 1960, Democratic candidates usually won. Republicans were almost never elected, especially in the Deep South. This means that the Democratic primarily election was usually the only election that mattered. African Americans were not allowed to vote in the Democratic primary election. Do you see how it fits? We weren't allowed to. When the Democrats said the Democratic Party was a club and didn't allow black members in. So blacks could not vote in the only election that mattered. And I'm going to mention these other 2. Purges. From time to time, white officials purged the voting rolls. They just took names off the list. You heard Trump talk about find a way to get rid of some votes. They call that purging. That means they took people's names off the official list of voters. Some voters would arrive at the poll and find that they were not registered to vote. Often they could not register to vote again until after the election. Purges more often affected blacks than whites. And y'all know this one. Former prisoners. People who had gone to prison were often not allowed to vote. So if you just think about black men and black women being charged for petty crimes and then having these really severe sentences that were felonies for marijuana, which we now sell, then that took away the right to vote. So it's built into the system. And then there's my favorite, poll tax. In the southern states, people had to pay a tax to vote. The taxes were about $25 to $50 in today's money. Many people had extremely low income and could not afford this tax. This poll tax applied to all people who wanted to vote, black and white. There were ways for whites to get around other laws, but not around the poll tax. Many poor whites could not vote because of the poll tax. So I'm saying all that to say that these behaviors, these practices of putting laws in place that keep black people and poor white people from voting is not new. So when we have Georgia leading the way to put laws in place to make it really hard to vote is a historical wound, is a historical practice. Now, there are things that can be done, and I have, like I said, I have an article who walks it out in terms of voting and all the things we know to do. But I want to talk about it a little different. Okay, this is what I'm dealing with, ladies, and the brothers who love us and our allies. If you look at how America is constructed, since the inception of this country, white men, white land-owning men, white supremacists, let's put it that way, okay, have legally and socially and politically structured things so they're always in charge, in power, and get to say. They change the rules. But here's the thing that I want you to really get clear on. If you look at the work we did last year when we were campaigning to get to elect Vice President Harris and President Biden, and you think about how many emails you receive for donations to actually fund on the ground level work to get in front of enough people to get them to show up, that's all money, okay? And so the way that America is structured is designed around keeping people out who don't have, as a collective, big money, and keeping people in power who have access to big money to keep the structures in place. Okay? So, for example, if you think about Donald Trump, God bless his soul, his whole thing was, I'll just keep buying and doing lawsuits and putting more money behind it and getting more media and more news cycles about my point of view. Okay? So so there was money behind his push. Okay? And that money came from other billionaires. Do you understand that? It didn't just come from, people who were living in the woods. It came from really, really established funded sources that structurally are designed to keep poor people out, well, not even poor, just regular folk, or better yet, black folk out and keep white folk in. So we almost always doing piecemeal, okay? And the thing that you need to understand about billionaire stuff, the money is not the problem. It's not that money is that's not it. It's the structures that are in place that get refunded to keep the structures in place. And we're talking 4, 8, 12, 20 years out. For example, President Obama had 2 terms. Okay, so that was 8 years. Okay, the gerrymandering, all the shenanigans of white supremacists that came to the light when Trump won the election, they have been working on that for at least 20 years. It came into play in big ways in 8 years. But because they had structures in place to fund the reorganization of who can vote in what district, the funding to put together campaigns that weren't the truth, the funding to get their candidates in front of people's eyes and tell a story that would have people vote for them, that was 8 to 10 years in the making, maybe more. But that meant that was funded the whole time. Do you see what I'm saying? So this is what I believe. I believe that as long as we don't have black women billionaires in place, we're going to keep dealing with this shit. And it's not because of race, it's because of interests. Okay? If you have someone who's writing a check who has a value that you have, and that person or that group of people can fund the campaigns of candidates that have the same interests as you, and you start that out 10 years in advance, 8 years, 4 years, 20 years, you're building an infrastructure to reorganize the structure that has the laws even get a shot. So when I talk about billionaires, I'm talking about an infrastructure. The money part is not the thing. The big part is the infrastructure to actually be able to fund politicians, congressmen, judges that have our interests in mind. It's not, it's like, I don't think, when I think of billionaire, I'm not thinking about money. I'm thinking about power structures. I really am. I'm thinking about, okay, you can't move anything in America without money because it's built on capitalism. And until you actually are in a decision making space, and I say you, I mean us, then we get this kind of stuff because they get mad, they change laws. Okay, that's how they fight. They've been doing this since we got here. And so it looks as if it's legit, but it's not. Now, they did, I want you to be clear, they did extend some hours, they did some things with the law in Atlanta that are fine. But what they did do was make it difficult, really hard. They cut, girl, they took away, the early voting went from 10 weeks to 4. Okay, they got rid of the drop boxes, and you have to go to specific areas. It's no longer convenient. You have to drive to get to them. You see what I'm saying? Like, and you can, and this is the thing that's crazy. It's like if you're standing in a long line, it is now illegal to give people water or food while they wait. This is what, like, and they can, because the structurally they have is set up so that they get to say. But when you can fund it, when you have people who fund it that have your interests at heart, then you don't have to go through that. Okay, so I'm very interested in, how can I say this, God, really comprehending, and this is going to sound, I don't know how it's going to sound to you, but how to beat them at their own game. I think sometimes we as a people, we fight white supremacy around fairness. We don't fight them around money. Okay? And I think about our ancestors, and it's just, I think about how they knew white people. They understood the level of mm, self-centeredness of whiteness in a way that we fell away from because we haven't had to live with Jim Crow in an obvious way, right? And so they knew how to navigate them. They figured it out. And when we were, if I'm just thinking about the early 1900s, right, when we owned our own hospitals, our own funeral homes, our own dentistry. I mean, when we own our own stuff, we understood what was going on, right? What I'm being with right now is, what if we got committed to creating Black women billionaires who really are part of the solution, so that we actually have the funding built in a way that isn't piecemeal. And I'm not saying anything's wrong about piecemeal. I'm just saying that the benefit of living in a capitalistic society is that we can create capital. And I don't necessarily know if we think of that as a revolutionary strategy. I think we think of marching and legislation as that. And I'm in alignment with all of it. Look, I'm doing all of it. I'm everything, okay? But if you think about it generationally, the reason why Black people don't have generational wealth is because white people burnt out, either blocked it or burnt it, okay? So we have to, in my opinion, we have to think in terms of generational winning, not just immediate winning. You know, it's really not just education as much as it is structures. And building structures require resource, and we can do it. In fact, we have resource now, but we're putting our resource in places that don't deal with the structure of white supremacy and actually creating our own structure around that counters their structure. We're dealing with the effects. It's almost like we're putting out fires instead of building foundations. And that's a cognitive choice. I'm not suggesting anything's wrong with it. I'm just saying how I'm thinking. You know what I'm saying? This is how I'm like, Georgia, if Georgia gets away with this, I think it was 200 and some odd other laws are already being contested. And this is just since in the last 6 months, because the Republicans are trying to lock in what they can because they're losing. Okay? And because we don't have any counter, they can get away with a lot because they have the funding to get the right people in the offices, Does that make sense? Because it comes down to who you vote for. But you can only vote for people you have access to and you know about. And if you don't have the funding to actually do the literally the grassroots stuff, paying the attorneys, doing the media, like all of that infrastructure has to be in order to win. If you don't, then it's going to be a fight. And I don't mean a fair fight. I mean, it's like, well, they did this and they're cheating. You have to have these landslide wins and victories. And they still say it's not the truth because they don't see our vote as equal to theirs. When Trump was saying fraud, he was saying black. And that's Venus, calm your nerves. My point is, I believe fight money with money. That's what I believe. Okay. And I believe that when you understand that no amount of marching is the same as being able to fund your candidates with ease and to pick them. And if you think about civil rights, Dr. King was picked. He was groomed for that. He didn't come. He didn't plan on that. He was tapped for that. You see what I'm saying? Same thing with Rosa Parks. There was another woman who sat down on the bus before her, but Rosa looked like a nice school. She looked like a school teacher. So she was good for the media, for the movement. But that's a different kind of thinking. And I'm saying we need to think like that, specifically as Black women in business. We really need to think through, okay, what do we need to do that? And of course, I'm going to go to technology. Y'all know how I think. I'm all about technology because I say it leverages things real quickly and we can access it when we do it together, right? But if we don't think in terms of building infrastructures, then we're going to always live at the effect of white supremacy. And I'm not okay with that. I'm just not. Okay. I'm not complaining. I'm not saying you did anything wrong. So please don't hear that. I'm just really thinking through that Georgia is setting a precedent that the other Republican states will eat up if it's not countered. Okay. And I'm thinking about the next election. I'm thinking about the next primary. I'm thinking I am now in my own spiritual evolution. I'm thinking 4, 8, 12, 16, 20 years out now. I wasn't thinking like that before George. I wasn't thinking like that. I was thinking about millionaire. Okay, but I'm gonna tell you something about millionaire. When you're a millionaire, it shows you how much infrastructure we as a people don't have. If you're anything like me, you saw the people, you saw the movies, you saw the cars and the homes, like, oh, if I can get that, I can make a difference. If I could be successful, I can help, I can make a difference, right? But what happens when you make millions is you start to realize how much you don't have in terms of infrastructure. Cash money is not structure. Money is not structure. Structure is actually having the funding to fund structures. It's like building a house. Even if you have a car, but you don't have a foundation to build rooms and put beams in, you cannot have a house that's sustainable. It's really, there's more to it than cash. Do you see what I'm saying? But you can't fund it without it. You can't fund infrastructure. You can't fund policy change. You can't fund politicians without money. But you're not funding it because you just want to win. You're funding it so you build in the infrastructure to keep the power, to keep the Democrats in power, to keep states blue. So what they're doing is trying to keep, if they can't make it red, they'll make it fucking bleed. Okay? And they're doing it with the structures they have in place. We can counsel those structures, but we have to, in my opinion, you got to think differently. I was so focused on justice, I wasn't watching the money. You see what I'm saying? I was like, why is Trump putting all these people in these circuit courts? Because he's stacking the deck for him to be able to take power away from the federal government, make it local, and he can control, or they can control, or white supremacists can control the states. This is the same fight we had with Civil War. Who's going to control the federal or the state? You see? And so if you have enough Republicans in power positions in a state, it can nullify what the federal government does if they don't move with power and velocity. Okay? So I'm saying what I got my eye on now is, yes, I'm marching. Yes, I'm donating. I'm doing all the things that I know work. But I got my eye on money in a very different way, because I am clear that if we do not start funding our own power structures, they will have us picking cotton. and in the 21st century way, right? They won't give us water or a crust of bread, and they mean it. So it's not even. I'm being a little light about it, so it's not so heavy. But look, if they won't let us stand in line to vote because we're descendants of slaves, right? Because that's in essence what they're saying. Like we're non-social beings, right? There's this wonderful book, one of my favorite books, is by a brilliant scholar. His name is Orlando Patterson. It's called Slavery and Social Death, and he looks at slavery from across the world, and he talks about how people who are enslaved become social non-beings, meaning they have no protection at all, or regard or power as a social being in the eyes of the law. And so when Trump was talking all this stuff about what is it, voter fraud, he was calling us frauds because we're not really people to him. We're not valuable. We're not viable votes. Okay. And I'm not gonna get into I'm not gonna get into all that. But what I'm trying to say is, we know how they fight. We need to not pretend we don't know how they fight. They fight with laws. Okay. So we have to actually, in my opinion, start looking at funding our own super PACs. And I mean, literally 4 years out, 8 years out, 12 years out, 20 years out, such that we have our interests covered. And it's not robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of strategy. It really is. We put people in place that have our interest. And I'm not saying be shady, I'm saying being strategic. It says like in business, if you're doing business, you got to be strategic about who you partner with, where you do your thing, what's your niche. Same difference as far as I'm concerned. It's all business to me. So, so that's what I wanted to share. I think that Black Woman Billionaire isn't just about the money. It's about being able to fund our own politicians, fund our own interests, be able to get up under legislation and lobbyists that could actually empower what we value. And that requires a chunk of change. Okay, it requires billions. And it can be done. And I think it can be done as a collective, not one individual, but I'm good with it, whichever way it goes, right? But I think that if we start thinking in terms of infrastructure, billionaire becomes a revolutionary act. It's the money part is not, that's just the fuel. It's the strategy of getting us in places where we can actually fund things that make a difference for 5 generations to come. And that is what my commitment is in this season of my life. I'm not interested in us living at the effect of something that happened 400 years ago. So I'm starting to think like, okay, God, what am I missing? And I was focused on racism. Now I focus on white supremacy. And I watch them and I learn from them. Like, oh, okay, I see what we're doing. I see what we're dealing with now. Oh, we're not dealing with fairness. We're dealing with who has the biggest microphone and who can fund it and who can put the money behind it so that it gets in front of so many people, it feels like the truth because it's on TV. Okay? Even if it's lies. So my point is, black women, black woman, I need you to start thinking and black businesswoman, I need you to start thinking in terms of millions and billions, millions and billions, millions and billions. Not money, but as a revolutionary act, as a resistance tool. You see what I'm saying? It's not about red bottoms. It's not about red bottoms. It's not about clothes. It's about putting in place what we need so that we aren't living at the effect of power structures that we can actually create. We couldn't do it. We couldn't do it 200 years ago. We couldn't do it 400 years ago. We couldn't probably do it 50 years ago. Okay, but we can now. We can now. We can do it with technology. We can do it with content. We can do it now. And I'm not suggesting that it has to be the way white people do it. I'm saying we have to think in terms of infrastructure, and infrastructure has to be financed. I'm saying I wasn't thinking like that when I started doing my thing. That wasn't my focus. My focus was taking care of me and my family and the people I love. Now I'm thinking in terms of infrastructure. Okay, how do we build a super PAC that that's committed to social change that favors us like they favor them? It's going to happen. Look, it's going either we do it ourselves or they're going to keep doing it to us. It's not, that is the nature of the way this country is built. Okay. And this is what I believe, and I'll pass the mic after this. I firmly believe that white people, white supremacists, think so little of us. It never would dawn on them that we would that we would create our own super PACs and really get up under different kinds of legislation and elections that have our interest at heart. I don't think they think that much of us. I think they think that we're just Jim Crow. I think they think so little of us, they don't see us coming, and that's good. They should underestimate us. They should. They should. They always have. They always will. They don't think enough of us to think that we can. I ran into this when I was doing Black Women Millionaire. They were like, well, Black women, there's no market that Black women will buy a book about becoming a millionaire. That's how little they think of us. So I'm not too concerned about them being threatened by us because they don't think that we can do anything. Not of any significance, especially when it comes to Billionaire Club. Girl, we could talk about it. My new talk. Let me say this and then I'll stop. My new tech startup is so dope. You need to roll with me so you can watch the dopeness unfurl. Okay, it's so Black girl. It's so Black woman. It is so us. It's just, and it's so it's this. It's created by a Black woman for Black women and built by brilliant Black men who love their mamas. Okay, so, but I'm not doing it the Silicon Valley way. I'm doing it the way that Black people do things, not their way. Okay, so I'm saying all that to say as I move more and more into tech and move more and more into investments and move more and more into the structures that actually move this country, I'm bringing them back to you. And I'm going to be talking about them all the way through the launch. So it's a wonderful education. It totally got me out of focusing on, it got me out of my feelings, I'll tell you that. And it got me into like, wow, they have everything in place to keep us always indebted to them, like sharecroppers. And I never saw that before, even social media platforms, right? I didn't look at it like that until I started to see the mechanism in which startups and technology move. And they don't move like a business, they move like investments. Two different models. And I'm like, wow, this is so dope. So as I learn it and master it, because that's what I do, and pimp the shit out of it, which I love to do, I'm going to be talking about this. So you're going to have to get used to me talking about billionaire because I want to make it normal to you. I don't want it to be this extra thing. It's like, no, it's not hard. It's only hard when you don't know the mechanisms. When you learn the mechanisms, everything is easy. Okay? So I'm going to be sharing that with you. So I'm going to encourage you to walk with me as I build, as we're moving it from, I got my team, I got my content creators. We're going to start moving into production, and I'm going to be doing updates about that. Okay? As we move through. And the more I learn, the more I'm bringing it back to you, okay? Because I say that we can win at this. And we don't have to do it in any kind of violent way. We can win with money. Because in a capitalistic society, money moves shit, okay? And we can do this. But we have to do it together, okay? I love you, sis. I love you, bro. I love you, fam. This is Dr. Venus. Know that you're loved beyond all measure, my sweet sister of success, and the brothers who love us. And please remember that you are the truth. You are the answer to millions and millions of people's prayers. You are the way, the truth, and the light. You are God wrapped in flesh. Always has been, have been, always will be. And I'm encouraging my business babies, my business women, to start saying to yourself, millions and billions, millions and billions, millions and billions. They come to me. They come to me effortlessly. What I do is million and $1 billion worth of business, right? I need you to start thinking in terms of bigger, not just money, but in terms of bigger. And the more you do that, the more space you create for it to manifest. And again, please hear me. I'm not saying billion is the answer. I'm saying billion is the fuel. Okay. And because we have technology, we can do it quicker than our ancestors ever could. And I'm looking at how can by birthing 100 Black women billionaires in the next 5 years, how can we help? How can we emancipate our people economically from the past for the next 5 generations? It can be done. I'm mapping it out. And my prayer is that you walk with me while I do. Okay? Know that you're loved. This is Dr. Venus, your hot mess millionaire. If you were fed by this word, this life-giving word, this life-affirming word, please pay it forward. Share. Sharing is an act of love. No one is talking about the stuff I'm talking about. Another way I'm talking about it. Educate. I didn't even curse that much. Okay? So my request is that you support me in supporting us. Okay? That's all for now. This is Dr. Venus. I love you, and I can't wait to keep you updated on birthing 100 Black women billionaires as I do it. You can watch me or join me. My prayer is that you join me. Goodbye for now.